That's awesome, love.
Yeah. Hey, Stephen.
Hey, Toby.
Hey, good afternoon, Stephen. Good
How are
afternoon,
ya?
anyone who's here.
Hello, Tobias.
I got a electric bike. Be proud of me.
Woo, good for you. Good for you.
Pretty sweet. Yeah. Are you familiar with the Rad Power brand?
Yeah, I am. I wish you could have come bought from us. I would have given you a better deal than them. But when it breaks, let me know. I'll come fix it.
I'm in Florida right now, so I needed it to be down here. So no worries. When I get one in Nantucket, you'll be the guy.
Awesome. Yeah, they're just I really love the e-bikes because my grandpa used to tell me stories. Like him and Harvey would get into like the moped wars with like Nantucket bike shops. So I'm trying to use capitalism to get rid of the mopeds, and I feel like I'll win soon enough.
Yeah, the moped's got to go. I'd be happy to help those leave.
Bit dangerous. Hi, Kathy.
Hi, how are you, Peter?
I'm good, thanks.
I want to show you what the bike looks like. It's got seats.
Oh my God, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's got room for both kids on the back. It's pretty sweet.
Dude, so much fun. That's great.
Yeah, it's a blast.
And you got a little exercise.
That's right.
Around.
Exercise, get the kids outside. It's awesome.
Awesome. Good for you. Peter, how you doing these days?
I'm doing pretty good, Tobias. Can't complain.
Nice.
We'd rather be talking to you in person, but that too will come.
I know. I miss the spontaneity of life. It seems so predictable and organized.
Well, at least we can see it on the horizon now.
Yeah.
Which is a good thing.
Yeah. How's Molly doing?
She's doing well. Yeah, she's out in Tacoma.
Nice.
Don't ask me why, but a whole bunch, Washington, a whole bunch of her people that she went to college with live out there. So she decided to go out there and strike, dig for gold.
Lovely. Awesome.
Yeah. Hi, Joe.
Hi, all.
Peter. Hi, Joe. Hi, Stephen.
Denise.
Hey, Joe. Hey, Denise.
Hello, Denise.
Hi, Tobias.
Hello, Denise.
Hi, Leslie. How are you?
I'm fine. Nice to see you.
Yeah, you too.
You're here and not away in the sun.
No, I'm on sunny Nantucket, so.
Yeah. A sunny shade of gray.
I like that so many members of the community are actually on video instead of voice.
Versus just a name, exactly. Okay, we still need 2 more FinCom people to show up to get a quorum because Stephen, sadly, you're not one of our people today, as you know.
Banished. He's banished.
And Denise, you made that decision before you even knew what we were talking about. You just wanted to put me in the penalty box today.
Yeah, it's random. I have a hat I pick people's names out of, and yours was the first one up today.
Right.
Might be Joe next time. You never know. Oops, I'll be right back. I just realized I left my dog out and didn't let him back in.
Quick, she's gone. We can take over now.
Okay, you're in charge,
Oh,
Joe.
you could hear that, Denise? Oh, sorry.
Hi, Julia.
Hello, how are you?
Good. Hello, Bill. Peter.
Okay.
He's,
How's the pickle, Peter?
oh, it's not me, it's Liz. I don't play.
Yeah.
I just,
Well, I figured you'd be dragged out there eventually.
you never know. You never know. It's become very popular.
Yeah.
We just set it up in Tom Never, so our tennis courts are pickle courts as well.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
nice.
Okay.
Jill's on.
Yeah, we're 5 now with Jill. Thanks, Jill, and George. I'll wait till George is connected to audio so we don't have to go through the George. George.
Hi, Denise, everyone.
Hi, everyone. Good. I think we can get started. What time?
Shoot.
Not my dog.
Mine, unfortunately.
Hi, George. Good. Okay. We are now using Zoom webinar for meetings, which allows for public to participate in the meeting as an attendee. Attendees must register to participate. The registration link is unique to the meeting. The registration link can be found in the description of the Nantucket Government TV YouTube live feed for the meeting. People registering to be an attendee must use their names, otherwise they will not be allowed to participate in the discussion. Attendees will join in listening mode, so all attendees please mute. They can click raise hand button if they wish to speak. The chair will call on those who have raised their hands in the order they were raised. The YouTube chat will no longer be enabled, and all questions should be directed through myself, the chair. As a preliminary matter, this is Denise Cronow, Chair of the Nantucket Finance Committee. Permit me to confirm that all members and persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. Members, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. So the first person I see, Peter Schaefer. You're muted, Peter.
Aye.
Thank you. Joe Grouse,
Aye.
Jill Veith,
Hi.
George Harrington,
Hi.
Stephen, I have to ask you to recuse.
I don't think I need to recuse from attendance. I'll be here and I'll recuse when we take up the article.
Okay, okay, perfect. So Stephen,
Here.
and we have 2 screens, yikes. So this is going to push my ability to, okay, good. Nobody else is on the second screen to facilitate this over 2 screens worth. Normally we're 1 screen for FinCom, I will offer. So, okay. Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. So I see Brian Turbot.
Here.
Thank you. Ali Penta.
Hi.
Thank you. Terry Norton.
Hi.
Thank you, Terry. And let's see who's on screen number 2. Oh, Joanna Roche. Hi, Joanna.
Hi, I'm here.
Thank you. And I think I caught everybody. I don't see Libby. Okay, good. Anticipated speakers on the agenda. So that would be Tobias Glidden.
Yes,
Thank you. And Julia Lindner.
Here.
Thank you. Okay. Good evening. This open meeting of the Finance Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12, 2020, due to the current state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, we have been advised and directed by the Commonwealth to suspend public gatherings, and as such, the governor's order suspends the requirement of the open meeting law to have all meetings public in a publicly accessible physical location. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed and encouraged to participate remotely. The order, which you can find posted with agenda materials for this meeting, allows public bodies to meet entirely remotely, so long as reasonable public access is afforded so that the public can follow along with the deliberations of the meeting. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will feature public comment as previously noted. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that any other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. All supporting materials that have been provided by the members of this body are available on the town's website unless otherwise noted. The public is encouraged to follow along using the posted agenda unless I note otherwise. We are now turning to the first item in the agenda. Hold on a second while I flip to the actual agenda. Blah, 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 blah. You'd have thought I have done this before. Thank you very much. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude their remarks, I will go down the line of members, inviting each by name to provide any comment, questions, or motions. Please hold until your name is called. Further, please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking, and please remember to speak clearly in a way that helps generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until the chair yields the floor to you and state your name before speaking. If members wish to engage in a conversation with other members, please do so through the chair. And finally, each vote in this meeting will be conducted by roll call vote. May I have an approval of the agenda?
So moved.
Second,
Second.
by roll call, Peter Schaefer,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
oh, Jill,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Joanna.
Aye.
Thank you. Okay. I will now open it for public comments. Okay. Peter Brace.
Yeah, I'm trying to, there's an item I want to speak on later in the meeting, and I'm on the YouTube channel. I'm trying to sign up as an attendee. Is that the protocol, or do I just put my hand up when the?
I think you can raise hand, I believe, on the, somebody smarter than me is going to tell you that. Or you can put your hand up, and I'm going to scroll back and forth between the two. So when we
Okay.
get to the Citizens Warrant article, Peter, I've noted that you want to speak on it.
All right, thank you.
The FinCom members will ask questions first of the sponsor and the representative, and then after that, I will open it to the public to make comments. So.
Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. Robin?
Hi, Denise. I subscribed to the town YouTube channel for this meeting,
Okay.
but I'm unclear as to what else I need to do to be able to ask questions, etc.
You just did.
You know,
It's fine. It works.
that's it? Okay, good. Okay.
I can hear
Thank
you. Yes, and I will, again, as I told Peter, just raise your hand. There is a raise hand function, and as I've never done it, I'm sorry, I can't tell you how to do it. If somebody knows that, wants to jump in and say, please do.
If you click on the bottom of your screen where it says participants,
Okay,
you'll see a screen on the right that'll pop up. It'll show people's names. And
Oh,
on
I
the
see.
bottom right-hand corner, it'll say raise hand.
okay, so Leslie, your hand is raised. Is it raised?
You can also go to the reactions section and
Oh,
click on that, and underneath that, there is a raise hand.
like that.
Just took mine down.
Yep, I just did what Leslie suggested. Thank you, Leslie. Good. I
Curtis
like
Barnes
it.
is dead.
Pardon?
He appears to be on the call.
All right, so we have minutes from December 10th and January 11th. Does anyone on the FinCom have changes to those minutes? If not, may I have a motion to approve?
Motion
So
to
moved.
approve.
Second,
Second.
thank you, Joe. Peter Schaefer,
Aye.
Joe,
Aye.
Stephen,
Aye.
Joanna,
Aye.
George,
Aye.
Jill,
Aye.
Denise, I approved unanimously. Okay. So we had committee reports 2 days ago. We will skip those for this meeting, and we will move straight to the review and discussion of Citizens Warrant Article U, the bylaw, short-term rental licensing. Prior to doing that, I will inform everyone that Chris Glowacki has recused himself from this discussion as there is a conflict of interest. And if you're not speaking, please make sure you're on mute. Thank you very much. And at this point, so Stephen, just to check, you're going to recuse prior to any discussion?
Yes, I'll recuse myself now. So
Okay.
now I am a member of the public.
Now Stephen is just a member of the public. Okay, thank you very much. So Julia, you're no longer on my main screen. I'm going to turn you. You said, Tobias, I'll start with you because it's your, or please,
Well-
and then you can hand it back to me and I'll hand it over to Julia.
Lovely. Thank you, Madam Chair. Also, I just wanted to thank you to everyone who signed in. This is a record attendance for a finance committee meeting. So Zoom is a very awesome thing. It's great to see community engagement. I wanted to kind of start out by thanking the FinCom. Last time I was here, you graciously supported the Neighborhood First warrant article. And, that article helped facilitate a better conversation around housing in the community, affordability, sustainability in regards to our housing stock. Over the last 2 years in talking to a number of different stakeholders and looking at a significant amount of data, being the chair of Act Now, we on Act Now and myself really realized that there was a really a major shift that was happening with our community in the context of short-term rentals and our ability to create affordable housing and create a sustainable place to live. And, as Nat Lowell used to always tell me is you never want to kill the golden goose. And I think what this article aims to do is not kill the golden goose, but to preserve it, which is the beautiful island that we have here on Nantucket. So Julie and I have prepared a pretty detailed presentation. We've worked over the last 6 months with numerous members of the community, have constantly changed the article, looking to make some minor changes going forward, but are really looking to have a measured approach to, along with a number of other communities, Boston, Kauai, I could go on and on, who have regulated or banned short-term rentals. We're looking to have a measured approach that has a positive impact on our community. So just wanted to say thank you so much for being here. I'm happy to answer questions. Julia is going to kind of walk us through our main deck, and then happy to get in and work with the FinCom to make this a great article that everybody can really get behind and support. And we've heard just a tremendous amount of positive feedback so far. So thank you for everyone I've spoken to already about the article, and look forward to working with you.
Thank you, Tobias. Julia, could you please introduce yourself? And I see that the security has been enabled for screen sharing, so you should be able to share your screen.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Julia Lindner, and I'm the Executive Director of Act Now. So I worked with Tobias on researching this article and helping to draft it with the rest of our team. And I hope that you'll learn something from my little presentation. Madam Chair, can I share my screen? Great. Bear with me as I adjust here. Is this adequate? Can you see properly? Great. So I'm going to take you a little bit through some of the research that we've done. And if you've been following some of our updates and emails, you know, this may be a little bit of a repeat, but I think it's worth noting some of the more notable findings. And the reason that we find ourselves where we are today, where we can actually assess more about how the short-term rentals have really shifted on the island is because at the state level, as you all know, we have the Department of Revenue that's now requiring short-term rentals to be registered. Oh, I'm sorry. Did something happen here?
No, you're good. We can see
Okay, I'm sorry. Something happened on somebody else's side. Sorry. You can still see my screen?
that. Yep.
No, I can't. I can see you, but not the screen.
Right.
It looks like Linda is sharing her screen. Hold on.
I see launch meeting.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what I see.
Denise, you got your hand raised.
It says
Yeah,
I'm
I
doing.
I haven't tried to unraise it because I didn't want to.
Okay, Julia, I just stopped sharing Linda's screen, so you'll probably be able to
Great.
reshare yours.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
Awesome, thank you.
And I'm going to hear this.
So as I was saying, the reason that we can have this conversation is partly because the state has a registry where they require short-term rentals now to be collecting the short-term rental tax. And that means that we can now request as a community information from the state to tell us how many short-term rentals we have, where they are, and a lot of other information. And that's what we've been calling a little bit. So I'm going to skip right to the meat here. But so what have we learned from looking at the registry? First of all, it's been about since 2019 that the registry has been in place at the state level. And so we've been requesting it every few months. And we've done a lot of research on looking at the individual rentals. And what we see is that we now have, as of December, over 2,200 short-term rentals on Nantucket. And that represents over 200 more than in July. So the number keeps going up. And that, could be just part of the fact that people are now in compliance with the short-term rental tax. So we have about 20% of our household units that are now short-term rentals in one way or another. And we also know from looking at the individual owners that 80% of our short-term rentals are owned by individuals or businesses that are based off island. There aren't too many other things that we can tell from the registry itself without doing more work. But one of the things that the state tracks is if an owner has multiple listings or multiple properties that are short-term rentals in the same municipality. And on Nantucket, that number is now 370 short-term rentals. So 370 short-term rentals are owned by folks who have multiple, if you like, on Nantucket. They could have multiple other places too, obviously. But the trend that's sort of alarming is that we have a growing number of investors, companies, vacation clubs that are sort of disguised as owners, if you like, and really the lion's share of the profits are going off island. And what is the problem with that is really that at the same time we know that our housing crisis is worsening. From the data that we do have, this is the same data that the Housing Production Plan uses to assess how many units we should be building on Nantucket, for instance. Well, we know that from 2010 to 2018, we lost 500 year-round homes on the island. Of course, we also know that we've been building. So we're losing hundreds of homes, and at the same time, we're adding a tremendous amount of new summer homes and short-term rentals. The bulk of the loss of the year-round housing has been in the year-round rentals. That market has literally been slashed by a third. So we've been, if you look at this trend and if you go backwards from 2010 to 2018, that's what we know. We lost on average 65 to 70 houses a year. So when I say lost, obviously they didn't go away. They were converted, right? So they went from year-round use to either seasonal or short-term rental use. And if we extend that trend beyond 2018, another 10 years, right, to let's say 2030, it will mean that we could have lost by then 1,300 year-round homes. And if you put that into perspective, we tout the Covenant program as being a very successful program. Well, the Covenant program has managed to introduce 96 homes in 20 years. So we know we've lost 508. So we're clearly not keeping up with what we're losing. And I think that's the message to take away. If you look at it differently, it sort of feels because, you know that we've been losing year-round homes. So we know that. We also know that our population has been growing. So in a way, what we're sort of, the analogy we're making here is that we're sort of stuck in a musical chair game where we're losing about 1 year-round home a week or more, and we're actually gaining people every week. And it seems like the pandemic has accelerated this trend if we look at the real estate market, and for instance. So there's no reason to believe that this is going to get reversed anytime soon. And so what's the connection with short-term rentals? Again, I think if you go on the ground, it's not just that you can see from the data that we've lost year-round stock. So when you look at the data, we had actually lost 6% of our housing was shifted from year-round to non-year-round, if you like. So we're down to 30% of our stock that's year-round. But really, when you look at it, it's, sort of what I mentioned is despite the building of affordable housing projects, despite the local efforts, it still seems like, and it's still in reality, we're creating neighborhoods that are turning into short-term rental clusters. So you can look at Cato Lane, you can look at Maya Comet area, Lover's Lane, they're definitely growing the number of short-term rentals. And then you look at what we're developing, some of these developments with in more affordable areas where land is more affordable in traditionally year-round areas are really being designed as little mini resorts, if you like. So Finback Lane and Gray Lady Lane are two examples, but there are more where the idea is, these are smaller affordable lots that are really being designed and sold as properties that are not affordable for year-round folks. And even in mixed income 40B projects, this is actually a little more even surprising to me. We're building more short-term rentals than we are year-round homes. And so in the case of Beach Plum, for example, there were 40 units that were built, 10 of which were deed restricted and affordable, and for year-round families found homes. But we also created at least 14 short-term rentals. And, none of the properties that were originally sold, the market rate properties, were sold to year-round families. So we know we have a housing problem, and it's sort of manifested differently in different parts of the island. So some neighborhoods have already, oh, hello, Linda, I think you have to mute.
Yes.
Allie, are you able to mute Linda?
Done.
Yes, I'm trying to mute right
Thank you. So some neighborhoods have, are manifesting a transition from year-round to seasonal or short-term rentals in at different stages. An area that's pretty much, for example, transitioned already is the Delaney Dairy Moore area. A neighborhood where the transition is really more midway is Maya Comet. So these are examples of homes that used to be year-round and that are now owned by off-island owners and that are being used as short-term rentals in some shape, way, or form. And I think what's notable is that when you look at the price at which they sold, you can even look at the first example, a house that sold for $615 or was purchased, if you like, by year-rounders in 2015 for $615,000, sold for $1.7 million in 2018, without any dramatic changes to the property. And actually, the other two examples on this page are similar. The example in the middle used to be a property, this is a property on Swayze that was actually a home to a year-round family and had 2 year-round rentals in it. And so when that home was lost to off-island owners, we really lost 3 homes, if you like, right? We lost 3 household units instead of 1. And if you look at Tom Nevers West is actually an example of a neighborhood that's a little bit later stage or earlier stage rather. So that it's just beginning its transition from year-round to seasonal and investor-owned short-term rentals. And in some of these cases, you know, some of these homes, like the third example on the right, this is a home that was purchased by the head of a nonprofit on the island that was sold this summer and is now registered as a short-term rental. So, you know, we sort of ask ourselves is if this is good for the island. And what I have to fall back on is that the more businesses we talk to and the more owners we talk to and the more residents we talk to, we realize that there's been a tremendous cost to the community. And I think you all are very aware of this, that, you know, it's a hard enough proposition to be a business owner here, but the last 10 years certainly have proved difficult in the sense that now you're forced to either buy property to provide housing for your employees or subsidize their rent in some way in order to attract people. The town certainly knows that, and to retain staff. Of course, taxpayers also have been, you know, putting their money where their mouth is and subsidizing affordable housing, which is part of the solution, certainly. And we all know how much we have on the 10-year capital plan, and that's hundreds and hundreds of millions of dollars to the infrastructure, the landfill, water quality. And so there's definitely a lot of stress from the demand that's coming from, we'll call it the development of the island. And last but not least, it's the residents who are really, you know, paying through the roof for homes and for rent. And I think that what we're learning from some of the data is that, you know, Nantucket has definitely more households that are in crammed conditions. And that's sort of one of the results of having, of losing all of these year-round homes. It's not just displacing people off islands, displacing people within the island. So that Nantucket County actually ranks at the top in the state in terms of the number of people per household, even though I think we would probably agree that we have some of the smaller houses and units in the counties in the state. So, you know, there certainly are impacts beyond housing, although that it's the most, I think it's the most important thing to focus on. We also have to we can't forget that neighborhoods have been disrupted by this. And I think traditionally the disruption has been in neighborhoods where where it's a little tighter. So in town is where we're hearing a lot of the stories of folks who have been really impacted by sort of, I'll call it commercial short-term rental, or sort of like a pure short-term rental living next door. And whether it's like constant noise or, you know, parties and groups, but the stories get a lot worse when you get into the details, frankly. And I think at this point, you will also find that if you talk to your friends in areas like Myakomet, that they are also living some of these disruptions, so that, you know, it's not just folks who are in town or in Tom Nevers or maybe some of the areas where we had more short-term rentals historically that are being affected. So it is about, you know, offering protections to homeowners who live in neighborhoods. And at this point, you know, the only real way you have of dealing with it is to call the police or call the health department if you think there's maybe a COVID related issue. But so there's no accountability for owners who may not be operating, you know, short-term rentals properly. And so our objective, we have several objectives with this bylaw, and the overall arching goal is a more sustainable community going forward. And that translates into protecting the ability for year-rounders to short-term rent their home. We know it's a big deal for folks when they go to compete to buy a home, or when they go and try to make ends meet to, you know, make their rent at the end of the month. But it's also to offer neighborhoods protections, like I just mentioned. And as Tobias pointed, you know, we don't believe that this is a really drastic measure, but is a measured approach that can have sort of an impact over time, the same way that we got to where we are. It didn't happen overnight, the same way that we can sort of change things back, if you like, a little. And we've done a ton of learning from other communities. Some of the earlier adopters of short-term rental regulations were the cities, definitely. The cities were the first ones to notice, because they didn't really have a vacation rental market to start with, right? They have hotel districts, so they know where to send visitors. But places like San Francisco, like New Orleans, a lot of California, frankly, definitely in Florida, and now on the East Coast, like New York and Boston, have caught on to the fact that their housing, their condos and their apartments were being snatched up by investors, and they effectively all banned investor-owned, saying only owners and residents can rent their own home if you like. Now, of course, that kind of approach doesn't work for Nantucket. Other places in Massachusetts are starting with regulations, but it's been a little slower because, frankly, we've only had a legislation in place since 2019. Boston, like I said, has led the way, and some of the suburbs like Cambridge and Somerville, Brookline is another good example. Salem is another one where they've put in some pretty strong legislation to protect their housing. And then if you go out and you look at some of the resorts, they have very different approaches depending on the resort community. Hawaii, which is at the bottom of this list, we actually have been conversing with the planning director in Kauai for several months, and they've had regulations in place since 2008, so even before Airbnb even existed. And they have effectively grandfathered short-term rentals and then banned new ones. Whereas Maui has a cap on short-term rentals and actually doesn't allow a house to be permitted for a short-term rental until 5 years after it's been constructed, which is an interesting one. I hadn't encountered that anywhere else. And others have, like Virginia Beach has got really strict occupancy. They don't allow investor short-term rentals. Sanibel and Captiva have 1 month minimum stays unless you're in a tourist zone. So it really sort of changes from place to place. And I think part of the difference from place to place is whether there's really an infrastructure in terms of a hotel infrastructure. So I think that's it does come into play a lot. And so, like I mentioned, I alluded to the 2019 Massachusetts Baker administration signing in a legislation that gave local authority for municipalities to regulate short-term rentals. And so these are the things that we have as options. We can put a ban, we can put a cap on the number, we can limit the duration of the short-term rentals or the frequency. We can require occupancy limits. Of course, there are taxing schemes, which in this case refers to the short-term rental tax, of which Nantucket is doing the local option. And the community impact fee is another option. And then we can, you can have insurance requirements, permitting fees, and of course, any sort of framework within regulation would likely have a registry of some sort to keep track of all of this. So we, as Tobias alluded to, we looked at very different ways of approaching this, and where we landed was prioritizing residents, the ability to rent their own home. And so we opted for a permitting process that would have two types of permits. One would be, and the question, would be, is it a Nantucket resident's home? And if it is, then that's a resident permit. And if it's not, that's a non-resident permit. And for residents, we're proposing up to 90 days of short-term rentals per year cumulatively. And I have to stop and say, I've had a few people ask me, what is a short-term rental? And a short-term rental is the same definition as what the state would qualify as a short-term rental for the rental tax. And that's a stay of 29 days and less. And so if you're looking to offer your property for a month, or if you're looking to rent your property for the season, or of course for a year-round rental, you would have nothing to do with this bylaw, and you would be fully exempt. But if you are looking to rent your house on a shorter term basis, under 29 days, and typically what we see is 1 week, 2 weeks, then you would fall under one of these categories. So if it's a residence home, then you would have up to 90 days, which translates into over 13 weeks. And if you're a non-resident, you would have up to 45 days or closer to 6 weeks.
Julia, hold on a second. Linda, could you please put your computer on mute? Linda?
That's what I want. Leave meeting.
Could you please put your computer? Thank you. Okay.
I've muted her. Thanks.
Thank you, Ally. And the language that we're suggesting also includes a 1-week minimum stay. I think that you all have seen, or some of you may have seen, a letter to the editor in the newspaper in response to a letter by Curtis Barnes, where we did acknowledge that this may be a more difficult proposition, especially for residents renting a private room. So that, you know, this is an area where we may be more flexible. So that's sort of the end of my presentation, and I will stop sharing.
Thank you, Julia. I'm going to go to the Finance Committee members first, and then I will take, obviously, questions from the public. So I'll start with Peter Schaefer.
Thank you. Julia, there's a couple questions. One is, were you considering grandfathering at all?
If I may answer through the chair, yes. So we did talk about that. And actually those were discussions we had with the planning director in Kauai. Kauai is a county with, you know, it's a different state, and they have different abilities. But the reason they opted for grandfathering is because they don't have the ability to regulate anything beyond zoning, if you like. And they found that it's been tremendously slow in bringing back any properties into year-round stock or islander hands. And I think that the other piece of it is, you know, there's no, we're not trying to say to folks who've been doing it that they should be the winners. We're trying to give sort of a level playing field. So that everyone can partake in the market and to some degree, and certainly not trying to hurt, you know, folks who haven't been doing it, for example.
So somebody who has a house and they had a lot next to them and they built another house on that lot, borrowed up to the hilt because they knew they'd make a lot of money renting it out, is up Schitt's Creek, correct?
Well, I'm not sure exactly what scenario you're talking about.
Well, no, I'm talking about if somebody made an investment based on a criteria that's different than the rules are now, they're out of luck.
Well, I think that it's true that we've built up, Nantucket did not create this industry of Airbnb investors, right? It's an IRS tax code. It's Airbnb platform making it super easy. Yes, fine, we have low property taxes, which makes in Nantucket more attractive than other places. And we certainly have a ton of demand for people wanting to come to the island. And so I think we have, by the nature of these investors being out there looking for places to park money, we have attracted some folks, including companies, right? Corporations who've decided that Nantucket is the place where they're going to open a short-term rental business. And if 6 weeks is not enough for them, and if they don't want to do any monthly rentals on top of that, or seasonal rentals or winter rentals to make sort of their proposition work, then yes, over time they may decide that Nantucket is not the place to be. And instead they would be replaced hopefully by, if it's a home that's within reach of a year-round person, which is not always the case with these properties, but it is definitely the case in some cases, then it could go back to a year-round person. And in other situations, it would go back to a summer or part-time resident who wants to be part of the community.
I think,
okay,
Peter, maybe
I'll let other people ask. Go ahead.
Peter, do you have any more questions before I move on to Joe?
I'll come back with another question later.
Okay, thank you. Joe, any questions?
No, I'll pass to these. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Jill, any questions?
Yeah, Julia, you're citing 2,200 homes that are short-term rentals on the island. Is that what you cited? How many of those are investor-owned only properties? Like, of those 2,200 homes, how many are Nantucket residents? How many are exclusively just for rent, like as a business that you're calling it when you've been, I know, citing the Copley Group? And how many of these are people that come and maybe they just rent for 1 month, but they're here for 2 months?
Those are really good questions, Jill. So we know that 80% of the 2,200 are owned by people who live off island. Okay, so you can do the math if you like.
And how do you come to that number? How do you know the bank accounts for all these properties, or you're just looking at the registry for the state?
No, so we're going through, we've gone through every single property. And if, for example, it's an LLC, because sometimes in a lot of cases, they're LLCs, frankly, right?
That doesn't mean anything. So
that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is in those cases, we have to do more research to figure out if it's an owner that's on the island or if it's an owner that's off island based on, so there's, whether it's between GIS, between the state secretary data, between the land records and the registry of deeds. I mean, we've done a ton of research to figure out where the owner actually is.
Because there's some people that are residents, but they're not here that much either. It can go both ways. So I'm just curious, are you calling a resident somebody who's registered to vote here, or they're paying their taxes here? How are you defining that?
So if, we may be catching some folks who are in the 20%, we may be catching people who are registered to vote here or who are paying taxes here, but are in reality maybe have another property. But yes, that's how we're saying if they're year round. So if they're registered to vote, or if they're registered with the assessor with a Nantucket address, for example.
Okay.
And if I can answer your other question, because I think it's an important one. So not every single one of these off-island owners is an investor owner. We know that, right? So what we do see, though, is that there's a growing number when we look at some of the data that's scraped from Airbnb and HomeAway and VRBO. There are a lot of vendors who sell out data, and they show you how much a property is rented, how much it's available. And it's sort of a growing and an alarming number of properties that is offered like 365 days, if you like. Okay, and so in the dead of winter in 2019, for example, we had 800 homes offered as short-term rentals. And so of course, it's a higher number in the summertime. Mm-hmm. Whether somebody is an investor owner or not, I think is a little bit more of a gray zone, but we can tell by how the property is being used that we have several hundreds of those properties.
Okay. And then for Nantucket residents that do rent their homes, it sounds like, this still could impact them greatly. And we know that a lot of people do want to rent their homes. That's one issue I wanted to ask you about. And the other, which I think is more directly related to this committee, is the income that the town of Nantucket is now getting through the short-term rentals. Like, do you have some way of making up that money? I think it might be up to $7 million a year now. That's significant money for the town. And I wanted to know, how do you think that we're going to bring in that kind of income again? Because that is from Baker's toolbox that you mentioned.
That's a great questions, Jill. Julie, I'll take a few if you don't mind.
Okay, great.
So through you, Madam Chair, I think on the question on Nantucket residents, we looked at that issue, and that's why we decided to try to focus this bylaw to empowering residents. So keeping more funds locally, maybe supporting folks that might run an Airbnb as a maybe, or as a small business. And so that's why it's less than 90 days. So when you look at the numbers for when people are really renting, we're giving the year-round community a significant leg up to be able to rent their home year-round. And so when we talk to year-round folks who might rent out a room or rent out another house on the property, we haven't found anyone yet who's saying, hey, I rent more than 90 days. And again, they could rent for a whole month and that wouldn't be defined as a short term. And so, we wanted to craft the bylaw to also encourage, the select board mentions they want to encourage more year-round housing and year-round rentals. And so we were hoping that through, the 90 days, we'd encourage maybe a few year-round people to rent year-round. Though it might be minor, I think it's important that it is across the whole spectrum, and we felt 90 days was about the sweet spot.
So it sounds to me, based on that, you're hurting the Nantucket resident, is kind of what I'm hearing, because while you're allowing them to rent, you're telling them you want them to rent year round. I mean, of the 2,200 houses, I guess what I kind of wanted to understand is who is that? If every single one of those houses became available, what year rounder is going to buy that house and live in it? Great questions. So I guess two points. One, if you dig into the data, so if we give investors the 80%, if we say they only get 45 days, which is fairly generous for a lot of folks who might just be renting their summer house a couple weeks of the year, 6 weeks, we're increasing the bandwidth for year rounders. So year rounders are going to be able to collect some more of that revenue. If you rent your house out or a portion of it, you're going to be more competitive in that bandwidth. Yeah, I don't really see that. And then that furthermore, when you list Inspirato is a club. So, I mean, they do long-term rentals for people. I feel like this kind of would give Inspirato even more of a platform here.
Jill, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask Joanna and get through the rest of FinComs because we have a lot of people participating. So I want to make sure everybody gets questions. And I have a feeling this won't be our only session on this. So we'll definitely get to every question you will have. I promise you, because I have several questions as well. So if you don't mind, can I hand it over to Joanna?
Sure, go for it.
Thanks, Jill. Joanna?
Thanks, Shelby.
My questions are also similar to Jill's, actually. So the question that I have first is, Peter gave a scenario of a person who might be able to divide their lot and build a second home. Well, if that person is a year-round resident and they have a large enough lot to have a second home and they want to rent it out seasonally, this article would penalize them. Is that correct?
It
would limit them to the 90 days.
Right. Yes.
Okay. So I'm a little bit stuck on why we would limit year-round residents to the 90 days, because I don't see the correlation with that increasing the demand for those rentals versus the people who live off island by limiting that to the 6 weeks versus the 13. So I'm confused by that, and I'm also not sure. I mean, it goes back to also the grandfathering idea, right? That if the year-round Nantucketers now who own homes shouldn't be grandfathered to allow them to have more rentals than 90 days. I can see the argument for limiting investor-owned short-term rentals and how that may impact this system, but I can't see limiting Nantucket residents who already rent out one home and live here. Like, why should we limit them? They do live here. That's it.
Thank you, Joanna. One other thing before I jump to the next FinCom person, anybody who's registered with your name. So for example, Tobias, you can't be Act Smart. You need to be Tobias Glidden for open meeting laws. So everyone whose name doesn't look like their real name, if you please switch it. Thank you. Housekeeping is always a fun topic. Okay, let's see. Who have I missed? George. George, you're muted.
No questions, thank you.
I'm getting spammed as we, okay, I'm back. Sorry, everyone. Even though I have everything on silent, it still made my computer go. Okay, sorry, George, no questions?
I second what Joanna said about the residents' ability to rent other properties if they have them. But I'm not, I'd like to see more of the numbers, you know, a set of numbers for different options so we would know what the town's going to get for taxes on properties and what the town's going to get for taxes that we can disperse in some sense or set up in some sense to create a housing bank, or, you know, a device that lets us get people into houses, owning them.
Can I answer that question?
Yes,
Madam
please,
Chair?
Julia.
I think that, so we spoke to the Affordable Housing Trust last week, and one of the members asked if we thought it was a good idea to pair the short-term rental tax with the problem of housing. And I understand that it's it's money that's welcome by the town with a lot of competing interests. But tying short-term rental taxes, or the collection of the short-term rental tax, to the problem of a growing number of investor-owned short-term rentals that's having an impact on housing could really create an unhealthy dependency. We've already seen it on the Vineyard, where some of the towns there have sort of dedicated an allocation of the short-term rental tax. And now they did this prior, of course, to dealing with short-term rentals themselves. And now they're reluctant to talk about, you know, the real impact that the short-term rentals are having on their housing. And so if we think that allocating a few $1 million is going to solve the loss of year-round homes that are being converted, I think that philosophically, I understand why you would use that money to help solve some of these problems. But I think there is a danger with approaching it sort of in an isolated fashion, if you like. And certainly what we're suggesting is not going to make a $7 million check go away. You know, at this point, it's sort of unclear where the number will settle, right? Because of the pandemic and because we haven't had a full year yet and we haven't been able to really budget for it properly. But what we know is, you know, what we're proposing is not something that's going to turn the faucet off. And certainly the short-term rental tax will continue, although, you know, it may not grow at the rate that it's been growing.
Thank you, Julia. Okay, I have a couple quick questions, and then I will open it to the members of the public. I'll open the public comment portion. As you have a 7-day minimum, why didn't you make it multiples of 7, 91 days, 49 days?
That's a good question. You know, I think that at the end of the day, I think that that I don't have a really strong answer for that. 3 months was the 90 days. And I think that if you're going to have one rental that might be 10-day or whatnot, you'll just round it off. But yeah, I don't have a really good answer to that question.
And I'd like to talk about it actually on the demand side. So with the 6 weeks, 6.5 weeks, it works out to be for the properties that are owned by off-islanders who rent their houses here, and they probably use it off season and then help subsidize the purchase of the home by renting it during the summer. And so let's say, for example, they're used to 10 weeks. 10 weeks is predominantly the season that you count on if you own a property here. And you rent it for $5,000 a week. So that's $50,000. Now, I don't expect, and the 6.5 weeks is basically a 35% less available. So I'm not talking about houses. I'm talking about number of rental weeks available. And now we're looking at 35% less rental weeks available under this bylaw. I don't see the demand going down by 35%. So I would expect one of two things to happen, that there'll be more buildings, more properties converted to short-term rentals, and that the rental prices will go up. So it becomes a much more exclusive location without having, I still need my $50,000 because I'm not willing to sell my house. And oh, by the way, it's a net profit. It's not all the profits go off island because I'm paying gardeners and cleaners and taxes, et cetera, et cetera. And so when I put all that together, I'm curious to see what you know about how you're going to change the demand side, because a 30% chunk of available resources is a big chunk to take out when we see actually demand going the other way right now.
So I think one of the answers to that is maybe to one of the first things you said, Madam Chair, which is most people are looking for 10 weeks. From what we've gathered, both from research talking to some realtors, as well as from the data that we can find on AirDNA, which is some of the realtors are very familiar with this data, but scrapes Airbnb and VRBO and HomeAway. 10 weeks it really means that you're an investor owner to some, or that you're more likely, I should say, to be an investor owner. The average property is more like 6 to 8 weeks and less than that. So it's certainly, I think that what you may be referring to is that we seem to be growing the number of weeks that we're looking for. But what we're seeing, and the number of properties that are actually being rented in the shoulder season definitely drops off significantly. So if, the equivalent of 900, I don't want to, it's basically the equivalent of a third of what's rented throughout the summer, July and August is rented, let's say, early June, and late September, if you like.
Okay, it's a difference of opinion on whether someone's an investor owner or someone's wanting to have a second home that they hope to be able to use, Julia. So moving on, where I'm going to get to, at this point, if there's no other FinCom hands raised, I'm going to go to Peter Schaefer. You had one more question?
Yes, please. Julia, you can walk me through how, number one, this is going to lower the price of, or make a house more affordable and help add to our affordable housing problem.
I think the best way,
improve our affordable housing problem.
I think the best way to show you that is to show you a little bit of, if I can share my screen and to show you what we've done on research between what we know about the registry, the properties that are owned by off-island people or businesses. And we've matched that with the assessor data. Because one of the questions that came out of the housing groups was, well, how do we know that any of these properties are actually competing with year-round folks, right? How do we know that we're actually, that aren't short-term rentals all luxury properties that are completely unaffordable to year-round people? Does that sort of, hopefully that can help answer your question. And so we looked into this because I think it's a valuable question. And Madam Chair, may I share my screen?
Julia, I really don't want to, Peter, would you mind if we take this offline or get the
Absolutely. Okay.
Because,
yeah, that's fine.
Okay, so I guess the answer is there are hundreds of properties that are assessed under $1.25 million that are short-term rentals owned by off-island owners. And we know that our year-round homes are converting into short-term rentals. And so I think that in itself, if you talk to some of the housing advocates, they will concur that this is happening. And so if we don't stop it, we're just losing more year-round housing. And how does that help our situation?
Maybe for next time, Denise, we might, or Madam Chair, we could go through a little of those numbers in more detail.
thank you, Tobias. That would be helpful. I'm sure this won't be our only meeting on this topic. Robin, you had your hand. So I'm opening it up for public comment now. And Robin, you've had your hand patiently up.
Thank you, Denise. So Denise, very good point. Madam Chair, excuse me. I am a single property homeowner who stays in the property 4 to 6 weeks a year. And I am targeting 10 weeks per year of rental. So I fit exactly the description that you just gave. Versus asking questions, what I'd like to do is just make a series of observations because of time. And so not to get into a Q&A, because Act Now has had hundreds of hours to work their case on Island. And I just want to take 2 minutes to make a couple of observations and leave it with the committee. First of all, I've owned a property on Nantucket for 30 years, so I'm very familiar with the situation. I also live in Santa Monica, so I'm happy to share my observations. So Santa Monica is one of the most strictly regulated short-term rental markets in the US, but it is dramatically different from Nantucket, which is, I would say, overwhelmingly dependent on tourism. So another time, I'm happy to share that. Also, Tobias and Julia, with all due respect, you said you've reached out to other constituents. Julia, you were on my email on May the 9th to the select board. I've heard nothing from you in the last 8 months as a homeowner who would be dramatically impacted by what you've done. I think all of you have raised a very good issue, which is about the potential financial impact on the town, which could be tremendous, given that you're the finance committee. And there is no objective third-party analysis about what this policy could do. So Tobias, with all due respect, you said you're not trying to kill the golden goose, but whether you realize it or not, you are taking aim at the golden goose, because the principal vehicle, more than any other market, for Nantucket to provide tourism housing has been short-term rentals to avoid the density of hotels. So that's the beauty about Nantucket, how it maintains that residential feel. Also, Julia, you talk about, 200 properties are under 1.25 million. I would argue that more than 1,000 properties are over that mark, and those are not going to solve the short-term housing crisis, but yet you are bundling and potentially harming all of those properties. A $6 million house on Eel Point, harming that homeowner is not going to solve the short-term housing crisis. A couple of other final points. On Island, you have marine. All of these businesses are owned by non-residents. Marine Home Center, Cumberland Farms, Safeway, the White Elephant, Nantucket Hotel and Resort, many of the restaurants. Non-residents are not the enemy in this situation. So I just wanted to make a series of these observations, and just to say, I reached out to you again yesterday, Julia. I emailed you, and 8 months ago was the first time. Yesterday again. I'm very happy to support and think through, as well as other stakeholders, but I don't sense that you've really made a true effort to reach out to them, including those who reached out to you. Thank you.
Madam Chair, may I?
Yeah, absolutely. Mr. Robin, thank you so much for your comments. And one of the things I just would like us all to be understanding about is when we're talking about this, everybody's on here trying to do their best. So Julia's ability to answer emails, Robin will share for another time between us kids, maybe over a drink.
Sure.
So if we can keep it more, a little bit more polite. So, but your points are valid and thank you for sharing them. So, okay, Robin, yeah, Julia, did you want to answer some of Robin's questions?
I think that your point was what I was going to make, which is if he has a personal issue, we can talk about it later.
No, it's not meant to be personal at all. I just want to cover a number of issues and just point out, because you said you had taken in the view of stakeholders, I've been on your radar since May of last year, 8 months ago, and I'm very happy to try to help you to craft and understand, regulation that would be beneficial to the island while doing the least amount of harm to the island, which is, I think, should be of great concern.
So the message I would take away now is don't overlook volunteers, Julia. So
well, if I did, can I just respond to a question to Mr. Nide's comment about, this is not a non-resident, an effort against non-residents. We have a lot of folks supporting this effort who are non-residents. And I think the reason that they're supporting it is because they've seen the transformation of their neighborhoods. They've seen the way it's been affecting their own property and their enjoyment of their properties. So that it's not that there is no issue at hand.
Yeah, Julia, I again, I don't want to take up time, but
Robin?
I may also
Robin?
support it, but I
Robin?
haven't been.
Robin, thank you.
Sure.
I'm quite sure you and Julia will have no trouble connecting tomorrow.
Okay.
Bill Greeter, you have your hand up, please.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the Act Now short-term rental proposal. I want to take just a moment to review my background. My family, like many other generational year-round island families, have done a variation of short-term rental long before it had the tag of short-term rental. And the family did that to supplement their income. We did our version of the Nantucket Shuffle within our own home to provide rooms to rent as a guest house. At that time, or during that time, the Ocean House, Gordon Folger, and the Wauwinet House were the only hotels on island. There was a large number of guest houses, and they were the answer to the average middle-class family to vacation here. Fast forward to today, we have far fewer guest houses and many more hotels. More and more year-rounders are doing some sort of short-term rental, which allows them to remain on island and raise their families. Over the last 20 years or so, our vibrant national economy has enabled many, many families to purchase property previously out of their reach, as long as they can supplement their income through short-term rental. The wild card in this process, in my opinion, is companies and corporations that have come on scene purely as an investment tool. The goal is simply to make money rather than make a home. While the investment process certainly is legal, it's not healthy for our community. Years ago, there wasn't any zoning, HDC, and many of the local regulations on Nantucket that are currently here were not around. As time marched on, various developers and investors started to impact our island. In an effort to at least modify or cope with the impact, various regulations have been adopted and amended and will continue to be so. I believe we are at a point as a community that once again, where we can no longer kick the can down the road. We must attempt to reduce the impact of investment/corporate development while still trying to allow year-round families to supplement their income and remain on island. Is this bylaw as presented perfect? I don't think so. I think that we've heard the presenters say that they've heard some points today to consider, and it would be an ongoing process. But in the interim, I would thank Act Now for at least bringing this article forward and the healthy discussion that I'm sure will ensure. Thank you.
Thank you, Bill. Okay, anyone else raise your hand? So Mr. Peter Brace, please. And Mr. Dickler, I'll get to you next. Dr. Dickler, I'll get to you next. So Peter, please.
Okay. I don't know how I'm going to do with this, but here goes. I'm one of those people who has a housing covenant house. I got it almost 3 years ago. I never would have gotten it unless a parent died and left me just enough cash to make a down payment. Otherwise, I would have been renting, or I would have moved off island. In fact, that's where I was headed unless it happened. And as it worked out, I was living in the place that I was living in. My landlords decided to put it into the housing covenant program with Nantucket, with Housing Nantucket. I'd lived here for 7 years, had great landlords, but I knew that if this didn't work out, I knew I was going to have to move off island. And it worked out. I was lucky. Well, I got the house, and then the day I got the house, the day it was mine, I got over 300 comments on Facebook from everybody telling me that I deserved this house. You really deserve this, blah, 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 blah. Well, no matter how hard I worked, I never got enough money to buy a house. I don't think I worked hard enough to deserve this house, but I deserved it according to these people. And I later figured out, you know, I've been here 30 years, I've contributed to the community. So in that way, maybe I deserved the house. But if you want to come down to, you know, working, there's a lot of people out here who deserve houses out here who are, you know, this close. They're this close. And the short-term rentals that are being gobbled up, these places that could potentially be houses that go into the housing covenant program are places where these people could move into, but instead they're making the difficult decision to move off island. And yes, this article, this proposal has issues, but I think that we have all these great minds here can be worked out, so that it's not worked out and killed on the town meeting floor. It's a step that we need to take. I think we are, by having the short-term rentals, we're diluting the quality of our year-round community, slowly pushing people off. I have 5 or 6 people, good, close personal friends of mine, who are on the Nantucket year-round housing page on Facebook, looking for places to live. They've been here as long as I have, or maybe less. And I know what's coming. They're eventually going to be posting that they're going to have to leave if they don't find it. I just think it's, I don't know. It's not just the disturbance in the neighborhood of, you know, parties, pool parties and whatever's going on. It's a disturbance within the community of people not finding places to live. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for sharing that. Dr. Dickler, you had your hand up next.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. And I've heard a lot of support for some form of restriction on short-term rentals, particularly from people who do not live here year-round. I think we would all agree that there's been enormous pressure on the housing market, more at the low end than the high end, but certainly in the middle as well, and houses disappearing from the grasp of people who live here year-round or rent here year-round. So I agree that the article may not be in the final form that everybody can support, but I think it needs work, and people should give their best effort to putting some kind of break on the unending appetite for second homes on Nantucket. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Dickler. Hillary, you have your hand raised.
Yes, thank you very much, Madam Chair. I wanted to make a statement and also ask a question. First, I wanted to make a comment about the idea of the tax revenue and the need to replace the tax revenue, the temptation or the prevailing view that this tax revenue is a fantastic windfall for the town. I just want to point out that the reason why we have this tax revenue is because in 2019, the Baker administration decided to allow local municipalities to tax short-term rentals. And they did that as a compensatory tax. So we on Nantucket are able to collect this tax because we have costs brought to our community by the nature of these short-term rentals. And, so I just put this in my mind, it's in the same category as a gas tax. We would never say, let's make sure that we consume more fossil fuels because it's really helping our revenue as a municipality. We would never say, like, let's sell more cigarettes because we get this tax from selling cigarettes. So just please remember that it is to recover the costs and the burden on our community. Then I would like to ask a question, which is really about the framework and the purpose that this finance committee has in evaluating this bylaw. Because I think as a municipality and as community civil servants, we really need to think about looking out for our community and supporting the strategic goals of our select board. So I don't think that it's, I hope, and it's really a question, is it the case that this finance committee is tasked with evaluating all of these proposed bylaws based on how they may or may not hurt or enhance any individual person's investment portfolio or personal choice that they made based on laws, regulations, tax rates. I mean, tax rates change all the time. And something that, you know, you might do like estate planning or something may not actually have been a good thing based on what might happen, because governors make decisions based on communities' needs, not individual portfolios. So I would just ask, when this group is evaluating whether or not to support this, just to think about who we're looking out for. And I guess I would also just urge finally that this committee and other committees and other commissions, planning commissions, I really would like to see some unified grappling with the question of whether or not we as a town and as a community believe that our affordable housing problem, which is a crisis, I think everyone agrees it's a crisis, is somehow being affected by these short-term rentals. I think we have to come to some kind of understanding about that. I think Julia presented fantastic information that showed we are losing year-round rental units because they are converting to short-term rentals. So do you believe that, or do you think that this isn't an issue? Because if we don't settle whether or not this is an issue, I don't see how we can figure out how to respond to it. And those are my comments.
Okay. Hillary, to your question about what the Finance Committee's role is in this. So we are responsible, according to our charter, to make a motion on every single article that's in the town warrant. Some of them have limited financial impact. You know, they may be, you know, the sense of the meeting articles, for example, we just say motion to adopt and off we go. Others will have a bigger financial impact on the whole island. And so if you take a look at this one in particular, some of the financial impact that it could have is on, yes, on tax revenue. It will have administrative costs. So if you read the article clearly, there will be incremental costs in town administration to administer some of the things that are in this article. And as I spoke to before briefly, demand isn't going to change coming to this island. So is there going to be a loss of even tourism revenue because now there isn't available houses to be rented? And so tourism then directly affects, again, the community of the island. So there's different financial dimensions to this, and that's what we focus on, absolutely. And it's never to favor one over the other. It's really to say Nantucket holistically, what is important to the community and what are the financial implications to it. And that's what
Those are yummy cheeses.
So Terry, you're not muted, my friend. So that, I hope that helps you understand why we're having this discussion, and it's not meant to be focused on any one particular group, but really looking after the Nantucket taxpayer. And years ago, I had a colleague who used to say, I sit on the cash box, Denise. I'm not, okay, good. So, you know, it's really our role as a committee to help make recommendations and in respect of the financials of the town. But the town financials are, you know, led by the select board, obviously the town manager, the town finance director, all of whom do an excellent job on this. So that's kind of how it fits together.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's very helpful. And I hope that part of that calculation would also be the cost, the taxpayer subsidy to help people who can't find housing and all of those other costs. If it's, I just would suggest that that might be part of the discussion as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Hillary. Leslie, you have your hand up.
Unmuted? Can you hear me? Oh, everybody else is muted. All right, you're hearing me, I understand. All right, I'm Leslie Forbes. I live in Matticat. I have been following the Act Now newsletters and research and whatever. And I I feel a little embarrassed that I'm talking about effect on the neighborhood rather than the effect on individuals being able to find affordable housing, but that's where my concerns are right now. And I'd like to introduce a little bit of context. In Mattakit, we have something called the Mattakit Area Plan. We were one of the first areas to develop a Mattakit Area Plan as part of the town's comprehensive planning project. It was accepted in 2006. You have to come up with a vision plan to do this. Our vision plan is to, quote, maintain the country and low density nature of the neighborhood, unquote. We have used this as a guide when we consider all planning, zoning, Board of Health changes, of which there have been plenty over the past 14 years. And we make sure that those plans or suggested changes, whatever, align with this vision. We've been pretty successful and pretty active. With the Village Height Overlay District, creating the Village Residential District, establishing setbacks and special permitting for swimming pools, and working hand in hand with the Board of Health to protect the water quality and to put in septic regulations. This is all to maintain the country and low density nature of the neighborhood. We have done the work. We're updating this now, but our core vision remains the same. So renting in Mattakit, as Bill Greeter pointed out, is a long-held tradition. It helps homeowners with income. It helps them maintain their ownership and do the property upkeep they need to do. And it allows renters the opportunity to experience Mattakit's quiet, low density neighborhoods and to have easy access to the natural world and our open space out here. We also have the darkest skies on Nantucket. So, but I would say, and short-term rentals of a week, of 2 weeks, or long-term rentals more than a week, a weekend, and I will open the discussion. I'll listen to what we ought to define as short-term rentals. I understand the state has done 29 days or less. I think it could be, anyway. Those rentals where it is a different group of people on a frequent basis with a commercial or a business owner of the property, not a neighbor, not a homeowner who stays there for 6 weeks out of the year, but a commercial or business who owns that property simply for the purpose of renting it. Often it is purpose-built. And if it's not purpose-built, it's renovated to be purpose-built. That does not align with our vision of a low density and rural neighborhood. Neighbors complain about living next door to renters who come and go on a frequent basis and have seemingly often no respect for the neighbors. And then when something happens, you're left to just call the police. The police have a lot of things to do besides come to you for a loud party or a swimming pool or lights that are shining in your eyes. It's embarrassing to call them for things like this, and yet it is still bothersome. And there's nobody to call. Who's the owner? What do you do when it's 2 o'clock in the morning for the 5th night in a row or the 3rd night in a row? And there's nobody to call except the police. And I think that puts a burden on our police. I went to Airbnb. I went to the Airbnb where you can total things. And as of today, there were 45 short-term rentals in Mattakit. There's about 256 septic systems in Mattakit. That's pretty close to 10%. I have no idea what the rental duration of these properties. It could be that they're 30 days. It could be that they're 10 days, could be they're 7 days. I think Julia can find that out. I cannot. But That's a concern to me. And I realize that the Commonwealth of Massachusetts has given Nantucket and other communities tools with which to take control of the way your vision plan. What is your vision plan for Nantucket? What is your vision plan for the neighborhoods? I know what the Mattaket's vision plan is, and I work pretty hard to keep it on target. So my final conclusion is that short-term rentals owned by businesses or corporations, commercially owned, are really not healthy for Mattakit. I think this is going to begin the discussion. I thank Act Now for getting the discussion underway. It's all in the details, as we all know, but I want to begin the discussion. I want Nantucket to drive its own vision rather than others who may have investment as their major goal drive our vision for Nantucket. Thank you.
Thank you, Leslie. Allison, you raised your hand.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. My name is Allison Mitchell. I am a member of the public. I am a renter. I've lived here for 36 years. I grew up here. I used to trick or treat at the houses in my comment that Julia, put in her presentation. A lot of my housing woes are somewhat nostalgic, but per this committee, that doesn't really make sense. I am also on the Affordable Housing Trust because I am very passionate about the housing crisis. But I am also the wife of a firefighter. He's a captain on the fire department. He's been here for 14 years. I'm an administrator at the Nantucket Lighthouse School, which is the only school that has remained open in-person learning this entire school year. We're two people that have always worked very hard, held good jobs, rented at high prices, basically paying other people's mortgages, and are unable to catch up and make any sort of a down payment. And like Peter mentioned before, it's really challenging to live in the high cost of living on this island, no matter how long you've been here, what your job is, and try to catch up and call it your home forever. I have 2 young sons, and we intend to be here for as long as we can, but it's problems like this, seeing neighborhood homes that I've recognized the owners of those homes for 36 years, seeing them just be bought up. There are neighborhoods that I just don't recognize anymore. But beyond the nostalgia of all of that, my experience now being married to someone who is in the fire service and is a first responder is that it's really devastating to teachers, police officers, nurses, members of the fire service to live here, to commit their time, their energy, their safety to this island and not be able to have a way to buy something and call it their own forever. Like I said, my husband's been here since 2006. He's the fire prevention officer now. He's the one that goes into the schools and educates all of our children on fire safety. He's the one that goes and changes the smoke alarms in all of the elderly's homes. And he goes and does smoke certificates for all of the home sales. And he wants to be here until he can retire. But we rent our home. And this fall, we were in a home for 9 years and we received a text message that the landlord wanted to sell. He wanted to sell for a number that was ridiculously high that no administrator and firefighter could possibly afford, close to $2 million. And we had to leave. And we had a month and a half to find something for ourselves. And it was really devastating. I mean, we were ready to start looking on the Cape, and my husband was ready to start commuting if that's what he had to do. And it's really sad. And so from a financial perspective, I think it's really important too that the reality is we can't afford to make it hard for our experienced teachers, nurses, fire department staff, police officers to not be able to be here. We can't afford it. We either are going to have to pay them significantly more money so they can afford to buy homes and live here and stay here and raise their families here, or we're going to need to find a way to make it easier for them to get into the housing market. There's really 2 ways around it, or else from a safety perspective, I mean, we're going to lose very, very good people. And we already have the police department. I'm speaking as just someone, a citizen. I don't know the details, but the police department has a pretty good turnover rate because young officers are able to come here, get their education, get their time in, and then go somewhere else where they can afford to live. So I just think from a financial perspective, it's really important that, yes, we're thinking about the money that's coming in, but we also have to be really aware of what we're paying our town employees that really make this place run, and make sure that we're considering that as important as the money that's coming in. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Allison. Peter, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I just want to say one more thing I forgot to say. With respect to Allison living here for renting all this time, you know, some other friends of mine, I know a married couple that have rented the whole time they've been here, and another couple, a guy who's now passed away, Del Wynn, and his wife lived here and paid rent the whole time. But my experience when you rent, you never really feel like you live here. You never really feel like you can relax and sit down and say, I live here, I'm set, I've got a job, it's okay. Doesn't matter what type of great job you got. You're at the mercy of your landlords. They could just up and decide they're going to sell for whatever reason, and that's it. You're gone if you can't find a place. So it's just something that I did the shuffle. I felt that feeling. I knew what that was like prior to moving into this house. Before I rented it, I had a rental for 11 years. So I felt that feeling too. And then I had this place for 7 years. But I've felt all of those living situations on the island, and now I own a place. But you really, you know, I bet that everybody at this meeting, not everybody, but most of the people here own houses. And if you've never had to rent here, it's an experience, not knowing that you live here totally, unless you own your own place, or unless you're renting a family house that's never going to leave your family. Anyway, that's it.
Thank you, Peter. Robin?
Yeah, just, you know, somebody who has concerns about Act Now's proposal, I want to register unequivocally the understanding of what Allison and Peter have said about affordability on island, and that is a crisis and something needs to be done. It's just a question of whether short-term rentals are a driver of revenue to the island for the finance committee to disperse and to help the island, or a foe, and in what categories, you know, in the lower end, the higher end. But just a quick question I wanted to put to Julia. July and August is a period when the island is very busy and some would say overwhelmed, and I get that. But there are 10 months a year when many people, residents on island, are scrambling for additional sources of income. Have you thought about differentiating your regulation between the peak periods of July and August and when people are really in need of income or secondary income the other 10 months of the year?
If I may, Madam Chair.
Please, Julia.
I think that, you know, we understand that the shoulder season has been a focus by businesses, and it's something that has grown with festivals and other activities that we have that are sort of bringing people off on during the shoulder season. But you know, to say that the off season, meaning the winter and the, you know, deep fall and spring, are attractive periods when people are coming to the island for short bouts of time, is probably not a reasonable assumption. And certainly COVID has proven that things change depending on circumstances. And, you know, homeowners have wanted to get away and people have wanted to get away because they've had no other option. But in a normal situation, I think that there's very little activity that happens in those months. That's just the reality of our weather.
Thank you, Julia. I do not see any other hands raised. is there any other questions from members of the public? 'Cause if not, I will close this for public comment. And I'm having to click back and forth because who knew a FinCom meeting could have 2 screens worth of attendees? So I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm about to close the public comment and ask my FinCom colleagues, any other questions or comments you would like to make? Before you do that, I'll say, for the next time we discuss this, and it's not scheduled yet, so I will let Tobias and Julia know when the next time it is, and then it'll be published on our agenda. There are some calculations that we need. We need input from town administration. We need impact on potentially the short-term rental tax revenues, those kinds of things. So there's some numbers that we need to look at before we continue our discussions and deliberations. So having said that, I will turn it over to anyone on FinCom want to raise your hand to add anything or ask anything before I ask for a motion to adjourn. Nobody's waving at me. Okay, then. So first I want to say thank you so much for all the people who attended. I think civic engagement is important, as we know, and I'm just so happy we had everybody here tonight. It was very, the things you shared were very insightful and very much appreciated. So with that, I will ask for a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
By roll call, Mr. Schaefer.
Aye.
Jill. George.
Aye.
Joanna.
Aye.
What am I missing? Stephen, I guess you can say aye.
I can sign off also, yeah. Aye.
All right, and Joe.
Aye.
Thank you.
Yep.
And aye from Denise. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Libby, Brian, Ali, for everything, Terry. And we'll see you next week, folks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.